podcast called Being Brilliant, and the purpose of the podcast is to inform, uplift, and inspire. Now, that might be a little bit more challenging for me today given the subject title, but I'm going to do my best. Today, I am joined by Canon Mark Hayden. Mark is a Church of Ireland archdeacon. He is a husband and a father, a published author of 4 books, a military history buff, and many more things besides. So Mark, you're very welcome today. Thanks for being here. And I'm really looking forward to our chat. Today we're going to talk about a lot of subjects which will all be covered by the book that you're currently working on. If published, this will be your 5th book?
6th.
Oh, 6th, sorry. Yeah. So, got that wrong.
No, don't worry.
Have you your working title, or do you know what it's definitely going to be called?
Well, there's 2 working titles. One is The Final Curtain, like Frank Sinatra's song.
Yeah, love it.
Is near. Or the other working title is All You Ever Want to Know About Death But Was Afraid to Ask.
Great, really good, yeah. So obviously you've been a priest for many years, and I imagine you have, in your ministry, you've had to counsel a lot of people who have an imminent death coming, or somebody who is bereaved, and you have officiated at many funerals. So all of that experience has, given you is that the reason you are writing this book?
I think I often find with some people, we're never prepared when we lose a loved one. No matter how imminent it may be, we could have someone who's been dying for weeks, or obviously people who lose someone suddenly, but we're never prepared, no matter how much we think we are. And a lot of the pressure on people at the time of a death, certainly in the Irish context, because we have a very quick turnaround. You can have an average of 48 to 72 hours before you actually have either the removal ceremony or the actual funeral ceremony, depending on your tradition. Mm-hmm. And I often find people, even if they've spoken about what a loved one wants, it's still a huge challenge to try and get everything in place. And people very often come away after a funeral going, I wish I'd done it like this, or I wish I'd prepared that. Did I do right by them? So basically it's going to be a user's guide on how to prepare yourself insofar as you can in the event of the loss of a loved one, or to help prepare your loved ones if you're the person who's about to check out.
Okay, so just on that, why is it so quick? I lived in the UK where it wasn't uncommon to have 3 to 6 weeks after a funeral. Why do we do it so quickly in Ireland?
I think it's an overhang of many years ago, before embalming, before the proper procedures, or the more modern procedures with embalming, that an undertaker can prepare the mortal remains of a loved one and they can be kept longer. So we have a faster turnaround time in Ireland than most places. For a predominantly Christian country still, we're quite Muslim or quite Jewish in our outlook, because both the Islamic and the Judaic traditions have a very quick turnaround for the burial of a loved one, but that very often it's what's known as a house table in scriptures. It's a common sense approach that becomes sacred, insofar as that in the Middle East, before embalming, the mortal remains wouldn't last in the very intense heat. So that's why it was proper and correct to bury promptly. That isn't the case in Ireland, obviously, but we do have a very quick turnaround. I think it's tradition. It's what people are used to.
Yeah. So do you think it's something that can be changed? That people, if the family needs more time, and I know sometimes we need more time because, we have the Irish diaspora all over the world, and you're waiting for somebody to fly back. But do you think, if a family say, look, we need about a week before, is that okay? Can we stretch it out?
Well, you can do that. That's entirely up to yourself. We're not, you mentioned the UK, I worked in the UK as well. And the reason the funerals take so long in the UK is A, the level of population, B, the number of deaths, and C, that most of the graveyards and the crematoria are owned by the state, i.e. the council. So you go in a queue, and when you get your turn, you get your turn. It can be up to 3 weeks in the UK, which I think is too long, because you've gotten used to the loss of a loved one, and then 3 weeks later you have the funeral service. It's like ripping the band-aid off the wound again, and you're straight back to square one. So you have a double bereavement. I don't know whether people will change or not. Our funeral practices were certainly challenged during COVID, and I don't think they've fully recovered as yet.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing to say, no, we want to have it in a couple of days. Basically what I'm saying is, do not be dictated to by anyone.
Yeah.
If
okay.
it's your loved one and you're the immediate family and you choose what happens, nobody else, not the undertaker, not the celebrant, not great Aunt Jemima, who is very important and likes to tell everybody every 5 minutes, it's up to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, for me, the universal question is, and it's, why are we terrified of death? And I can put myself right in there. I can honestly admit I'm really afraid of death, and I think most people are, and maybe that's why it's still a taboo and people don't like to talk about it. Why do you think we're just so, to anyone I speak to, they're terrified to death?
Because it's final.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one thing we can't avoid.
Yeah.
They used to say there are only two things in life you can't avoid, tax and death. Now, some people seem quite good at avoiding tax. However, nobody has yet managed to avoid death, despite people out there trying to change their plasma and all that sort of thing. We will die. We are finite. There's a certain clock ticking within each one of us, and when we hit that end time, that's it. Nothing can stop. Jerzy Papuszko was a solidarity priest in Poland in the 1980s, and he worked very much against the communist forces. And people used to say to him, they're going to get you. And he said, until God wants me, nobody can hurt me. But when God wants me, nobody can save me. And it's true. When it's your time, it's your time. Maybe because I have a very deep belief in the next life, I could sound a bit smug saying, I fear the method of my death or the mechanics of how I will die, but I don't fear death.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful that you don't fear it. And I'd love to get to that point. And I think, I'm in my 50s now, so it's a little bit more inevitable than it was when I was younger. You can just put it off. It's like really far away. Yeah, we're going to die, but let's not think about it. Yeah. So it's not until A, you get older, and B, you've been given a diagnosis that could be terminal, right? Yeah. That when people, that really makes you start to think about it closely. Or you've just lost somebody, it reminds you, right? Yeah.
There was an old guy at home in the village where I'm from in County Wicklow, and he had a brilliant sticker on the back of his little Renault 4. And he used to drive like a lunatic. How he didn't kill himself or anyone else is beyond me. But on the back window of the car, he had a sticker and it said, life is not a rehearsal, it's the real thing. And he's right, it's not a rehearsal.
So you believe in the afterlife. What do you think? Because it is the great mystery, isn't it? Unless somebody, unless you have an insight I don't have.
I don't.
What do you think will happen when you die?
I think we go to a different place. We become the best version of ourselves. I do believe we'll be reunited with loved ones. Will we be sitting on clouds playing harps? Will there be a big pearly gates in St. Peter there judging whether we're fit to get in or not? I don't know. There's an awful lot of stuff that's come into our belief systems and our structures because of tradition that's been handed down. But I don't believe that what we are ends when our physical being ends. I've seen too much at the time of death to believe that there isn't something else.
So have you been with many people at that point,
Yes.
at that time of death?
People who have been dying in their own bed at home, people have been dying in hospital beds, people have been dying on the side of the road, people who have been badly injured in accidents. I've been with people at different times and in different contexts.
Is there such a thing as a good death?
Yes.
Yeah.
There is. I remember being with one person, and if anybody's listening, I'm not going to be talking about your family or anybody, and I will not be naming anybody, but I remember attending someone who I'd known for a very long time, a great character, loved life, and I was with that person on the last evening of their life. I sat with them whilst they had their dinner. They drank a couple of gin and tonics. I celebrated Holy Communion before dinner and before the gin and tonics. And then that person went to bed that night, closed their eyes, and never woke up. That's the best version.
Yeah.
That's the way I want to go.
Did that person know they were going to die?
Yes.
Yeah.
Didn't know when
It was going to be,
it was going to happen, but didn't know when it was going to happen. But had been very ill. But that's where a very good palliative care team, which we're blessed with here in County Wexford, the palliative care team were fantastic and made that person's passing very peaceful.
Okay, so for anyone who's listening who isn't familiar with that term, what is palliative care?
Pain relief.
Okay.
There's no reason in this day and age for anyone to be in pain when they're passing.
Okay.
It really isn't. And that's not me saying euthanasia or anything at all like that. It's a proper, mandated, medically controlled pain relief that people are entitled to.
Okay. And am I correct in saying that people can avail of, is palliative care available to all citizens of Ireland? And can they have that at home, depending on the circumstances,
depending
if possible?
on the circumstances and if there's a palliative team in the area. But absolutely, we have palliative nurses. And then here in Gorey, we're very, very lucky because we have the wonderful Gorey District Hospital where I'm chaplain, and we have a number of hospice suites there. And the care that people receive in Gorey Hospital is second to none. Mm-hmm. We have a wonderful team of staff there. We're also supported by the Friends of Gorey District Hospital, who are up for a charity award, so give them a vote if you get a chance.
Great. Okay.
But they do magnificent work, and people are allowed to die with dignity there.
Yeah, okay. So do you think that if people have the right palliative care, then perhaps, I mean, there's a lot of conversation nowadays about, dignitas and the right to die. Do you think that maybe that's maybe not so necessary if they still have the palliative care option?
There is a discussion going on. Well, there was a discussion going on in the Dáil with regards to the right to assisted death. Now, many people will shy away from that because they're afraid that people will be killed off for what they're leaving. Yeah. And obviously, anything like that has to be mandated and has to be watched over carefully, and it will no doubt be a referendum in our state at some point. Dignitas, I'm not sure. I have a lot of questions about it. I have worked with a number of people who have gone to Dignitas. I could be very controversial and say they're running a business, which they are. I think with proper palliative care, people can live out their last days as well as possible. However, people, if they choose to follow that route, and people aren't familiar with Dignitas, it's a place in Switzerland where you can go and you can decide when the time is to go. But you must bear in mind that if I go as a private citizen of Ireland myself, obviously, and I go to Switzerland and pass away, there are no ramifications. But if my wife accompanies me, she can be charged with a criminal act in assisting a death. That's the bizarre thing there. And there have been cases in Irish law where we've seen people taken to court over assisting a loved one to pass away. But all I will say is it's very easy to sit in judgment of people until you are in that position yourself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Suffice to say, it's not a route you'll be going down.
I can't say yes or no because I hope I'm healthy now. I'm 56 years of age, but nobody knows what the future holds. But I would hope I don't need to have to do something like that, But nobody can ever answer a question like that until they're faced with the circumstances, I think.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. So, in Ireland, what happens when somebody dies? What are the chain of events that start to occur, officialdom and all that kind of thing?
The minute someone passes?
Yeah.
Okay. If somebody has been visited by their GP, in the event that GP visits still happen, but if somebody has been attending a doctor, or someone has been visited by a doctor within the last short period, within the last 4 to 6 weeks, then a doctor can come and can certify if a person has passed away. There's no need for the Gardaí to be called. But if a person dies suddenly, it's the law of the land that the police must be informed so that they can ascertain that there are no suspicious circumstances. That's not implying that anybody has done anything wrong. That's just basically the law of the land. The guards have to be called. Once the guards are happy, they've established that everything seems to be above board, and then obviously there's usually paramedics there as well, and the only person who can certify that the person is dead, but a doctor must come and must sign the paperwork to certify that a person has died. At that point, you can contact a local undertaker to make preparations for your loved one to be taken to the funeral home in order for the undertakers to prepare them to either leave them in the funeral home to be viewed or to bring them home if you choose to wake them at home. In the event of the doctor being unable to certify, then the mortal remains will have to be taken. It's usually Waterford Hospital in this area for a post-mortem.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad fact of the matter is, you queue in life, you queue in death, you go into a queue. The ones where there had been a very definite criminal involvement insofar as a violent death, they're the ones that take priority because the chain of evidence is very much time constrained. So if somebody just passes away in their sleep and there's still a question post-mortem, they'll be further down the list. Sounds dreadfully black and white saying it like this. Then once in many traditions, people like to call their priest or their minister or their rabbi or whoever it is to come and pray with the deceased. Very often I would be called before the person will pass, and I'll be with them when they pass. In the Roman Catholic tradition, there is the sacrament of the last rites, where a person is given absolution and anointed. Some Church of Ireland people like that as well, but very often they like you to be there with them to pray, just to support the family. And then certainly when in my circumstance, what I normally say is, let's not talk about funerals, let's not talk, because some people may say, no, we have to arrange the funeral. So just get your head around what's happened, and then leave it till the next day, and then the process starts where you have to think about where you're going to have the funeral, when you're going to have the funeral, what you want to do, and that can come in on you fairly fast. So
just before the moments when you move on to the practicalities, just before that happens, in the initial aftermath, it must be a really charged and difficult space to hold for you to be in that moment.
I suppose I'm lucky insofar as that I've been here for 24 years almost. So I would know most of my parishioners. There would be occasions where I would be called where I wouldn't know anybody at all. But the most important thing is just to be kind and to support those people. And as I often say to anybody who's with me for training, the most practical thing you can do as a priest in that environment is go and put the kettle on. And leave the people with their loved one there, and you go and get, because people need a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. It's something to hold in their hands, and it could be the first hot beverage they've had for 6 or 7 hours, and it could be the last one they'll have till the next day. So it's very simple. I remember I was only ordained about 3 weeks, and the parish priest and the other curate went on their holidays, and I was on call, and I got called to a home where a young woman had passed away from a massive asthmatic attack. And I walked in, and I didn't know anybody, and eventually found where the mother was, and I said, I'm really sorry, if there's anything I can do. And she said, well, what the bleep can you do? And I said, would you like a cup of tea? And she said, actually, yeah, I'd love a cup of tea. And I can't imagine I was very effective as a priest that day, but I stayed and I made her some tea and I sat with them. And it was only a few months later when I was talking to her, she said, you know, if you'd started the whole priest stuff and the holy stuff and all that, I probably would have screamed at you and told you to get out of the house. But you just did something practical. Yeah. You said, would I like a cup of tea? And at that moment in time, that's all I needed. Yeah. And I don't know where it came from, but that's where, for me, as a person of belief, that's where God's guiding me and making me do the right thing. Doesn't mean I haven't done the wrong thing on a few occasions. I have, but certainly in that circumstance.
People often don't know what to say or do. They feel really awkward. Yeah. And they say the wrong thing.
Oh yeah.
I do remember once somebody said to my mother after my father passed away, and of course they meant well, but they said, you know what you'll do now? You'll get yourself a dog. And it was just in that moment, that was not what she wanted to hear. Maybe 6 months down the line, it would have been okay. But in her mind, she saw the person equating the loss of her husband with the loss of a pet, and sure, just replace with another pet, you know. So, you know, people mean well, and maybe at another time that would have been great advice, and or coming from somebody different. It just depends. But you hear all things, don't you?
Every version of things.
Yeah.
God only takes the good ones. So it doesn't say much for the rest of us. Or God needed her more. How could God need a 35-year-old mother of 2 small children more than her children and her partner needed them? You know, people say stupid things. Oh, get down on your hands and knees and thank God you're on your feet. And I'm not being disparaging of people. If you don't know what to say, don't say anything.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And, do you know? And Irish people have the best one of all. I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
Do you know what? It sums up everything. That you're sorry that person has lost someone. It's a perfect answer. Because you are sorry for their loss. And some people say, all I said was, I'm sorry for your loss. Ouch. Spot on.
Mm. What can you say? Because you
There's
can't
nothing
say
else you can
anything
say.
to bring them back or make it better.
The worst thing you can say is, I know what you're going through. Unless you have lost someone similar in similar circumstances at the same time, you don't know what they're going through. You really don't.
I feel it's important to say something. You know, let's say you return to work and everyone feels awkward, they don't know what to say, so they just take the easy route and don't say anything and act like it's never happened. That happened to me, and I was quite offended by it, by people that I was close to who acted like it hadn't happened. You know, so I think
friend groups exclude you. I've heard about that happening. Certainly where, you know, the way some couples, there would be like 3 or 4 couples and they would all socialise together. And one of the couples, one member of that couple passes away. And then the survivor is dropped by the other 3 couples. It's almost, I don't know whether they feel, oh God, sure, they might be making a move on one of the others. Or, oh no, sure, how are we going to be able to carry on when so-and-so isn't here anymore? And it's a double bereavement. They not only lose their life partner, but they lose their friend group as well. And that happens more often than you'd imagine. I was shocked to hear that.
That's, you know, that's going back to the awkwardness again.
Yeah.
People are afraid to be happy around a bereaved person as well, isn't it? And they feel like they can't be themselves.
Yeah.
And it's terrible that we feel that way, and we shouldn't. You know, we're all here to help each other.
Yeah.
And we're all going to go through it.
We are. I think Irish people have a benefit in that we have such a dark sense of humour in ways that we can sort of make light of difficult situations. That might sound like a contradiction a few minutes ago, saying don't say things, but I was in the civil defence for 21 years, and when you're in uniform you learn very dark humour to cope with difficult things. And my father died suddenly, and a couple of my colleagues said things, probably just when my mother didn't hear them, but I found them funny, and my dad was certainly found them funny. And it was such a bursting of that bubble of tension. And it was great because they were treating me like normal. And they were acknowledging that Dad was gone, but that they were doing it in a way that he would have appreciated as well.
Can you give me an example? Can you remember any of the things that your mates said?
Oh yeah, you see, my dad died suddenly. He collapsed and had a massive heart attack and went into a coma for 6 days before we switched his machine off. But one of Dad's colleagues, who was a friend of mine as well, he said, you know, I still can't believe he's dead. I thought he just pretended he had a heart attack just to get out of pain for the Christmas dinner. You know, and I roared laughing and said, well, it wouldn't have been unbeknownst for him to play the most horrible practical jokes on you as well, because someone had said to him, oh, the dinner is X amount in Jack White's on such and such a date, and he went, oh grand, oh Jeannie, and went down. And they for a couple of minutes, they actually thought he was playing a trick on them. And he said, I hope I haven't offended you telling that story. I said, no. I said, but it's him. It was quintessentially him. And it was brilliant. And later on I was able to say it to Mum, and she sort of looked at me, and then she started laughing. She said, I don't know whether to feel guilty or amused, laughing at it. I said, no, but it would have been what he would have done.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
he would have got great gas out of that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because really there's plenty of room for humour in a funeral, because you're celebrating the person's life. And if they were a great character and they meant something to you and you've got loads of funny memories, it's that laughter that eases. And you know, you're crying 1 minute and then you're laughing, then you're back to crying.
Well, that's how I conduct funeral service, and I'm sure some people go, God, your man must be half cracked, because I have the congregation laughing, but laughing about happy. And I always say, we're coming in here today, it's sad what we're doing, but have one really good, happy or funny memory that you have of your time with this person, and hold on to that and cherish that and get you through this difficult time.
Yeah, that's what sustains you through the
sure
dark
you
times.
Do that when you minister at funerals as well.
Absolutely. And I think in Ireland we do find the humour in funerals. Absolutely.
We do death well in Ireland.
Yeah.
I'm not smoke saying that. We do.
Yeah. How many funerals would you say you've officiated at this point in your life?
I don't know. I've been an ordained minister since 1992, so that's 32 years, so I couldn't tell you. I did hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
So it's giving you probably a great idea of what you want. What are your funeral wishes? I'm going to record it now for posterity, so there's no...
I couldn't possibly comment because I would horrify people, but nevertheless.
Oh, really? Okay, but your family know.
Oh, they do, yeah.
And that's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
That your family know what your funeral wishes are, because when the day comes, and if it comes sooner than people expect, at least they know what you wanted, right?
Yeah.
That's something that I see as a funeral celebrant. I see the relief and the eased burden with families who had already had those conversations, and they know.
And that's part of the reason you've seen that. You've read some of the draft of the book. That's what I'm saying. Prepare, talk about it. Don't keep changing the subject. My grandfather was a terrible. Every time we talk about funerals, he'd start crying. I'll be gone soon enough, and then he'd go off in a huff. But that's not what we were talking about. And as it turned out, we didn't know any of his wishes when he did pass away. So we don't know whether we did right by him or not. Whereas my wife and my sons know what I want. I don't think my wife's too impressed with my music choice, but nevertheless, she has said to me a few times, there is no way you're having Highway to Hell as the piece that you're going out on. And my eldest son's name is Luke, so I want the Imperial March from Star Wars, given that Darth Vader comes into that one, and I look like an undersized Darth Vader when I wear my funeral cloak. But people might say, oh, you're a clergyman and that sounds all very disrespectful. It's not disrespectful. It's a service of thanksgiving to mark the life. And I want people to go out uplifted. I don't want people going out sad. And people will be sad, I hope, will be sad. But at the end of the day, I would rather people went out uplifted and say, do you know what, that was him. That really reflected his character.
Yeah.
And I would hope that's what we could do.
Yeah.
You know. But at the end of the day, I'll be gone. I'll be with my dad and whoever else is up there belonging to me. I won't have any say in what happens. And very often that's a big bugbear for people. I have to obey their wishes and I'm not that sure I'm that comfortable with them. If you've been asked to do something that's really off centre and you're not comfortable with it, you think it's really strange, well then talk to your immediate family, and if you're not comfortable with it and you don't think it's the right thing to do, go with your gut.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, Mark, if you want to be buried or cremated?
Cremated. And
have you a specific reason for that you choose that over burial?
I don't know where my sons are going to settle.
Yeah.
One of my sons is working, having graduated college, and talking about further studies. I don't know whether that'll be here or overseas. And my youngest son is currently in Vienna and heading to Bratislava on a weekend jolly from college, and I don't know where he's going to finish up. So Lorraine, who's my wife, our plan is that whoever goes first will be cremated, and then when the next one goes, those ashes will be joined together, and our dog Jessie, when she goes, her ashes will go in with us as well. So if we're buried somewhere, great. If the boys keep us with them, that's okay too. Whatever, it'll be their decision because they'll be dealing with it.
Yeah, so it's for very practical reasons.
For
really.
Practical reasons,
yeah,
absolutely. And they're also being very mercenary as well. Some places, It's far cheaper to bury cremated ashes than it is to buy a full plot. Certainly I know in Dublin the prices for full graves is prohibitive.
Yeah. Are we allowed to scatter ashes? Like, is that, or unofficially do people do it whether you're allowed to do it or not?
Officially, if you choose to scatter ashes, if you're scattering ashes in a public place, you must get a permit from the Department of the Environment and the local county council for the disposal of human remains, even though they're ashes. If it's on private property, well, nobody can dictate to you what you do on your private property. However, a lot of people beg forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah, that's funny because I definitely see myself as a rule breaker, not a rule follower. So if you're listening, loved ones, and the time comes, will I tell you what my funeral wishes are?
Go for it.
Okay, so I want a removal at the funeral home. The reason being, my house is too small for a wake.
Okay.
Because I'm expecting thousands. So I just think it would be less of a burden really on people making teas and coffees and stuff. I don't really feel I need to be waked. I don't think I'm going to look my best. So...
you'd have an open coffin, would you?
Well, yeah, I think if it's important to the loved ones, yeah. So, 2 or 3 hours reposing.
Oh no, mine will be closed.
Oh, yours will be closed?
If
okay,
you want to see me in life, you're not coming to see me in death.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I get that. Yeah, well, there's maybe something I have to give a bit more thought to. So anyway, yeah, removal to Murphy's in on the Avenue in Gorey if they're still around when my time comes, and I'm hoping.
Product placement alert.
Yeah, alert. And then a funeral service in the home, followed, and the funeral service, I would love live music and I would love some Irish element to it, but there can be recorded songs too, and plenty of maybe funny stories.
Yeah.
I definitely like people to be laughing.
Yeah.
They can cry too, that's okay, and they can, share stories about how amazing it was. And then followed by private cremation.
Yeah.
So people don't have to go all the way up to Dublin then for like another service. So I want it to be just simple, and I don't want it to be a burden on the family.
Something that's creeping into Irish funerals, and I'm not judging, but I'm just personally I'm just uncomfortable with it, that I've seen it happen in the Roman Catholic Church and in the Church of Ireland, that the mortal remains are taken away to be cremated and nobody goes with them.
Yeah.
I've just, for me, I suppose it's because I'm asked to conduct a funeral liturgy, and to me it feels like, well, I haven't finished it. Yeah. And I have no issue with going to Mount Jerome or Dardistown or Newlands Cross or anywhere else. I don't like Glasnevin. I'll put that up there.
No.
Not very nice experiences there. I'm sure they're grand now, but in the past I just found you were a number and that was it. But I feel it's important to be there to do the prayers at the coffin side as the drapes close.
Mm-hmm. I suppose for me, I don't have a very strong relationship with the body of the deceased.
Okay.
And I noticed that when my parents passed, looking at the body straight away of my father, I was very aware, I'm looking at the suitcase that he used to inhabit, but he's not there anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I really, I feel he's already left that body, and I don't think he minds. But I understand what you're saying. A lot of people don't like the crematorium because they don't like this idea of the curtains closing. They have all these conceptions around, they're going to see flames, and nothing happens. Yeah, nothing like that actually happens.
The
at
coffin
all.
Closes, nothing. The curtain closes, nothing happens. It's not until the people have left that the coffin is removed to where obviously what happens at a crematorium happens. It does not happen the minute the curtains close. Yeah.
Well, to me that's the same really as the private cremation, except you're not there at that point, But then my ashes I would like scattered in the sea.
Okay.
We came from the sea originally.
Okay.
And I'd like to go back to the sea.
Yeah.
And but they can do whatever they want.
Just go a good bit out beyond our club.
Why? Because the water quality is bad enough in Arklow.
No, God forgive me, that's terrible. I'm from Wicklow, that's a terrible thing to say. No, it's where there's an effluent discharge out when it comes out. So you don't have to be swimming through that.
No, probably not. Probably not. Mind you, I'm sure there's people who say I've been swimming in effluent my whole life anyway.
Sure, look, we all have elements of that. Yeah, everyone is. Yeah.
So tell me, let's talk about grief after the funeral. I often think that, the funeral is so important. The ritual of the funeral is so important. It is a way of having that outpouring of emotion. It's the way of celebrating the person. It's so important to the grieving process. But
100%.
Once that is done, everybody else does really go back to their lives, and you have to carry on.
Absolutely. And I never realised how prompt that is until I lost someone really close to me, until I lost my dad, that we couldn't move for people. We turned Dad's machine off on the Thursday. Dad came home on the Friday. In Dublin diocese, they don't allow funerals on a Sunday. Down here we do. So it meant Dad's funeral was delayed, so we had a 4-day wake. We were exhausted.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely exhausted. And all these people coming up to you saying, we're here if you need us, we do this, we do that. And lovely and well-meaning and all that. And we buried Dad on the Tuesday. And I would say maybe I've spoken to 1% of those people since.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I'm sure people think, well, he's a priest, he should be well able to get on with it and deal with it. I mean, I ended up conducting a funeral service 5 days later for a man who died in the exact same circumstances as my dad. I probably shouldn't have done it, but I felt obliged to because I knew him, and I still have no recollection of doing that man's funeral. I just did it completely on autopilot. Now, I'm told it was a lovely funeral and it was very kind and compassionate, but it was just, I just wasn't in the right headspace. And it'll be my dad's 8th anniversary on the 1st of December. I don't think I really began to process my dad's funeral death for about another 3 years.
Interesting.
And that this is someone who's a trained grief counsellor. This is someone who's a minister of funerals, who is supposed to be in inverted commas, death professional. Doesn't work like that. Really doesn't. I still go to ring him. It's mad.
Really?
Yeah, something happens, I go, I must tell Dad, and I go, oh, well, I'll just have a conversation with you now.
Yeah.
And I do. I still talk to him.
Do you think grief does something to our memory? Because I can relate to that. I have very patchy memory around the time that when my dad was dying and then after he died. There's just blanks there. I suppose your brain is in shock and you need time to process.
Yeah, there are things that you remember. I remember my dad collapsed on the Friday, the week before we switched the machine off. And all that week, I'd been stressing about something at work. I was really upset. It was a real big issue in my head. And from that day to this, I don't know what that issue was. It can't have been that important because whoever the issue I perceived to be with never came back to me and said, well, you never followed up on that. It just shows you that we can blow things out of proportion. And then when reality lands on you like a ton of bricks,
nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters. And that's the way we have to prepare. You can't prepare because it's just going to happen someday. Someone close to you is going to die. And I think that's the awfulness of death, that it can be so sudden in ways. But then I see other poor unfortunates and they have a very long, drawn out end time, and it's very difficult on everyone around them. And I'm very grateful that Dad passed so quickly, because my dad feared ill health. He was not a good patient. He was terribly upset when any of us weren't well. If I remember having spinal surgery 2 years before Dad died, and he was very stressed and upset, wouldn't come and see me in hospital because he hated hospitals and all that. So the fact that Dad hit the ground and never knew another thing about it, I'm so grateful for that.
He didn't suffer.
No, because like that, his attitude was, I don't fear death, I just fear the journey there.
Yeah.
That was his concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in one way, he had a good death.
He had a great death, in that he never knew a thing about it. He was standing, he'd had his lunch at 1 o'clock. He was working, he was only about 5 miles from home, so he was delighted that he wasn't going to burn much diesel driving the machine back that day. And they were planning a big dinner. He loved to entertain. They were planning a big dinner for Christmas, and he was having the crack, and he was haggling with the lads about the price. Gone. He was doing exactly as he wanted.
Wow.
And he and I always had a standing joke. For those of an age listening would remember the county home in Rathdrum, St. John's. It was never deemed a great place for a long time. It's a wonderful place now. It really is. And I always said to him, I'm going to put you in the county home. And he said, tell you this, Mark, he said, I'm going to get up and go to work some Friday. And the following Friday, Willie Doyle, more product placement, will bring me home in a coffin. And that's exactly what happened. Dad went out on Friday, the last Friday in November, and he came back on the first Friday in December in a coffin.
I think he manifested the manner of his own death.
That was, and we used to slag each other dry. He says, "I'll cod you. You won't get me in a nursing home." So yeah, so that was the standing joke with us.
Oh.
And some people might be horrible to see you joke about where you put someone, but they do say treat your children well. They choose your nursing home.
There's no hope for me. I have no kids, so I don't know where I'll end up. No, but tell me, so that was, in the grand scheme of things, he got his wish, and it
dreadfully
was
hard for us.
Yeah.
At the time, but now we can sit. Mum comes to us for Christmas, and we can sit and watch The Midwife on BBC One and have chats about things. And very often, Mum would still turn around and say, it was hard to take, but I'm so delighted he went so quickly.
Yeah, yeah. She can look back now, in time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, unfortunately, in deep contrast to that, you've got people who lose their loved ones really tragically. They could have died by suicide, or it could be, a very young child.
Yeah.
And those circumstances, those people need extra kid gloves, because so when you talk about how there's a lot of people around at the funeral and then you never saw them again, I hate to think that would be the case in particular for anybody who's had a deep tragedy.
I think some people have key friends, and those key friends are wonderful, and I've seen that firsthand. People who've lost loved ones for tragic reasons, and they say that the support of one or two key friends has been the be all and the end all. You don't need a whole group of friends. You just need one or two really good friends to support you and allow you to grieve. You need to be allowed to grieve, because some people, as you pointed out, you've experienced it. Some people are uncomfortable with your grief, so they don't allow you to grieve. It's almost like you're embarrassed to be sad.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy. That's not right.
Yeah.
We have to grieve. It's a natural process that the body has to go through to be able to process what we've experienced in any kind of trauma.
It's a difficult conversation, though, to have with somebody, isn't it?
Yes.
How are you feeling today? How are you doing? And to be able to admit, actually, I feel crap. I'm just devastated. I miss my loved ones so much. I don't know how I'm going to be able to continue without them. My heart is breaking.
Yeah. Brendan O'Carroll does a great sketch about that, about Irish people. We say, how are you? Or how are you? And the way he does it, someone says, how are you? And you go, well, actually, they're already halfway down the street. They don't care how you are. It doesn't mean anything. But it's very healthy to be able to say, no, I'm not great. I really feel dreadful. And to allow the person that space, you're doing someone a huge favour if you allow them the space to be able to say, no, I don't feel good. Because that might be the first time they've felt safe enough to be able to say that to someone since they lost that loved one. And if the answer they get is, oh no, I can't listen to that, I don't do death. I've heard people say that. Oh, sorry, I don't do death. Stick around.
Yeah. And you won't talk unless you're being listened to. Like you have to.
In a safe space.
Yeah. So do you think that's the secret? The secret to coping with grief. I mean, do you ever fully get over some grief? I do think you have to, life will continue even for you, the person. But
you come to terms. I don't know whether you will ever get over some griefs, but you will come to terms with them and live with them. It's part and part. It's like the scars that we pick up in life. People are very disparaging of tea and sympathy, but you know what? The period of time from putting the kettle on, sitting, talking to someone, and just being there, and sometimes all a person needs is a safe space to be able to cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I envy people who can cry. I can't cry.
Really?
Yeah. And I envy people who can cry.
Did you cry at your dad's funeral?
No.
Have you cried since about your dad? Wow.
Yeah. Perfect product of 1970s, 1980s Ireland. Big boys don't cry.
Actually, I was going to raise that issue with you about grief, the difference between men and women dealing with grief, and I'm specifically thinking Ireland, so apologies for anybody who's listening. I know I've got listeners from all over the world, in fact.
Non-binary people.
Yeah, exactly, sorry, and non-binary people as well, who don't identify as a male or a female. But my experience of Ireland, I don't know if you've seen the new Cillian Murphy film.
I don't think I could watch it. It's so important. It's a story that needs to be told. I remember serving Mass in the Hyde Park convent off Collins Avenue or off Grace Park Avenue in Dublin when I was a seminarian many years ago, and I hadn't heard about Magdalene Laundries, and I wondered who these elderly ladies were, and I said to the priest, he said, oh, they're the girls that nobody claimed. These elderly ladies in their 70s and 80s coming in with teddy bears under their arms. They'd become so conditioned that they were still there. Nobody ever took them home. They'd been Magdalenes and they were left behind.
Institutionalised.
Totally institutionalised. It was heartbreaking.
So they were still in the home that took them in initially when they were first brought as young women?
When they were committed, very often by a family member, for fear of the shame. Being very sarcastic.
So the film we're talking about is Cillian Murphy's new movie, and it's called Small Things Like These.
Small Things Like These.
Yeah.
Can't
remember her name now, but anyway.
Yeah.
But local writer, I believe,
local
and it's
writer,
set in New Ross.
It's set in New Ross in the late 70s, early 80s, and basically the gulags that existed under the noses of all the great and the good.
Yeah. I mean, the central theme in the movie is something we're very familiar with in Ireland. It was the church stepping in when a young woman would become pregnant and was institutionalised, and then the baby was probably taken away and adopted.
And the sad fact is, Mairead, a lot of the girls who were incarcerated were committed by their families. Yeah. And girls would escape, would get home, would be beaten, and would be dropped right back. Yeah. Horrific.
Yeah. The thing though that struck me about that, because I was familiar obviously with these stories, there's been a few movies, but I thought what it depicted really well was men of that era, Irish men of that era. I thought Cillian Murphy played it really well. He was a tortured soul, but he kept it to himself. It was all kept inside him. He had no vocabulary for expressing how he felt. And, I think my father was of that era, but I don't think my father was a tortured soul, but he was a very quiet man. Yeah. So I've seen that type of man growing up in Ireland, and I wonder, is death of a loved one much harder for men?
Yeah, I think unfortunately alcohol at wakes is very often a coping mechanism. They'll have a few jars and then it's their emotion, it's the drink talking or whatever it is. My father insisted on a dry house at his wake, and I was more than happy to enforce that, much to the upset of a couple of people who were most put out that they weren't going to sit there and drink all day, and I said no. And a lot of tortured souls, a lot of, you would have heard it. I'm older than you would have heard it as well.
Only just, Mark.
You're very kind. stop snivelling or I'll give you something to cry about.
Oh.
You know, that dreadful, I mean, no surer way to stop someone crying than to threaten physical violence on them because they're upset. I mean, God almighty.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah. We didn't have, I remember we bought loads of drink for my mother's funeral, but then nobody drank it.
Yeah.
We make such good tea.
Oh, there you go.
I think, but everyone drove to get there. They, drove from a distance, and it just didn't fit in with it. But each to their own, and not every family's like that, A quote from your book notes: "We cannot and must not just go through the motions with a funeral. The day it becomes like that for me is the day I need to hand in my resignation."
Yeah.
Can you tell me what you meant there?
Basically what I mean is, when a person dies, this is going to sound stupid, but bear with me. When a person dies, that person has never died before. Those people have never lost that person before. This set of circumstances has never happened before and will never happen again. They are totally unique, utterly unique. So they have to be treated as unique by the priest, by the singer, by the videographer, by the undertaker. And let's be honest, we'll have all gone to liturgies either conducted by ordained ministers or celebrants or whatever, or just a family member, whatever. And they just go through the motions. And it's a complete monotone of voice. And it's just like, I just have to get through this. And it's heartbreaking. Because this is the last interaction they will have with the physical remains of this person. And it should be cherished. It should be full of life. It should be full of laughter. It should be full of tears. And it should be full of joy as well as sadness. But it should be... I don't like to use the word sacred very often, but it's a sacred space. Whether that's the sacredness of the earth goddess, or it's the sacredness of Jesus Christ, or whatever your belief system is, we are in a sacred space and we are doing our duty by the mortal shell of somebody whose energy has gone somewhere else, whether you believe it's gone back to the universe or it's gone to heaven. And we have to do it right. And that's why I say every funeral I do has to be treated as unique, because you just can't go through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, get off my hobby horse now.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Yeah. And it's important for the family as well.
Hugely important for the family. Absolutely, because if you have a family who feel that the person conducting the service doesn't care, it's dreadful.
Yeah. We've all heard those stories of people.
Look, my grandfather's funeral, the priest who conducted it kept referring to him as Joseph. We're all gone. Nobody ever called him Joseph. He was known as Joe or Pop. That's what he was called. Mm-hmm. And drives me mad. Mm-hmm. Or then somebody stands up and go, "Now, I was only talking to them last week." I'll give you a funny anecdote. A great aunt of mine loved Charlie Haughey because he got pensioners the free pass. My great aunt used to love going around wakes. She used to feed herself all week. She'd go to a wake here, she'd go to a wake there, she'd go to a wake anywhere. And she arrived in at a wake one time, and I happened to be doing the funeral. And she was chatting away to the son of the man and going on, "I only had a great chat with your father last week and all this," and that was great. And then the son, who knew I was related to him, said, "Your aunt's some chancer." I said, "Sure, you don't need me to tell you that." He says, "Yeah, she had a great conversation with my father. My father just stroked 3 years ago and never spoke again." So, but yeah. No, we have to do it right.
Yeah,
we really
absolutely.
Do.
Oh.
Yeah, and families have to be allowed to do it right. And there's a lot said about whether people can have eulogies before or after the service, what kind of music you have. I allow secular music at funerals once it's respectful. Now, This is the fella talking about Highway to Hell, but that's me very much with my tongue firmly in cheek. But if there's a particular piece of music that's important, it could be the first song they ever danced to. We're of an age where you remember slow sets. That could be the piece of music, and that means everything to them, and they want to have that piece of music at the funeral. They want somebody to speak. I'm delighted when somebody wants to give a eulogy about a loved one, because they know them better. Even no matter how well I know them, a loved one will know them better. And I think that's so important. And I think it's unfortunate that people meet challenges.
Is there certain priests that don't allow eulogies?
I believe so.
I think I believe so. I'm not going to mention any names or anything like that, but yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I heard allegedly that some don't, and I think that's a crying shame. That's just ridiculous.
Now I understand when you see career criminals and breaking in toolkits are brought up to the front of the church, and lads are standing up and they're effing and blind and about how great Paddy was, he could break into 27 houses, and that's no reflection of any one individual. There has to be a fine line, but I think it's unfortunate that everybody is being punished for the transgressions of a few.
And in terms of the suitability of the music, are you saying you're drawing a line at Highway to Hell just in case somebody does want that out of you? Are you going to allow that?
No.
You're not going to allow it, okay.
Not in the church. There's plenty of other places where you can have it if you want. Yeah.
Fair enough.
I like Black Sabbath too. But
Tell us, all these, beliefs people have and common sayings around when somebody dies, when they see like signs that they're there, like a robin, feathers, butterflies. What do you think of all that?
What harm is it?
Yeah.
Now, some of my more...
Do you believe any of it?
Yeah. Some of my more theologically minded colleagues might be horrified that I say that, but I'm followed by robins.
Are you?
Much to the amusement of my wife and my sons, but I am followed by robins.
Could I just say that maybe you live in an area of the world where there's just a lot of robins and there is no meaning in it, but you choose to find the meaning? Because I see robins everywhere as well, but is it just...
It happens all over the world. Wherever I go, there'll be robins.
Okay. Do you believe that's your dad? Yeah. He's just checking in on you, saying, absolutely. I'm here, mate. I'm just, looking over you.
Yeah. And if that helps people, what harm is that doing?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, it's certainly
I'm what's known as a panentheist. Pantheism was a heresy where people believed nature was sacred. But a lot of Druids and a lot of Celtic spiritualists will believe that. I'm a panentheist. I find God through nature, through God's creation. Like St. Francis of Assisi was a panentheist as well. So I go out, I see God's creation, and I see God's creation as sacred.
Yeah.
So that's where I feel very comfortable out in Courtown Woods.
Yeah. I think I'm the same as you, and I feel like the sea is my religion.
Absolutely. For me, it's walking through the forest and the wind and the trees.
Yeah.
That's just like electricity for me.
Yeah. Do you ever see butterflies or feathers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
and you probably find a lot of people tell you that.
It could be a pigeon flying over me, dropping feathers apart from anything else or whatever. But, I've seen them in the most unusual place.
Yeah.
And I would never condemn anybody for getting comfort from that.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people have great faith in angels. Some people have great faith in praying to Padre Pio.
Yeah.
Or to Our Lady. And that's all good too. Whatever helps you get through the day.
Yeah. And whatever helps you get over grief, because the death of a loved one is probably the worst thing you will ever have to experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is the absolutely worst thing you will ever experience.
Oh, of course, we act like it's not going to happen to us. What is that famous saying? Somebody you probably know who it was. They said, was it the Dalai Lama say that most people live as if they're acting as if they're never going to die, but in the end they die having never lived?
Absolutely. Sounds like
is that the Dalai Lama? Yeah.
Life's not a rehearsal. Get on stage and live to the best. I heard another expression. Don't nurse yourself and protect yourself and present a good corpse. Get to this pearly gates and they say, how did you last that long?
So what have you learned then, Mark, to summarise? You have so much advice and so much experience. You have been around, you've witnessed death firsthand, and you have been around so many people who are experiencing a bereavement.
Don't let it be a big spectre sitting in the corner. Face it. Make preparations. Talk to your loved ones. Let them know your wishes. Find out what their wishes are. You often go into a funeral home, you see funeral plans and all that sort of stuff. But the most important plan is knowing what your loved one wants, or telling your loved ones what you want. because it takes a huge amount of pressure off. The first statement I often hear is, well, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to want, we're not religious. And I go, it doesn't matter, you don't have to be.
Yeah.
And certainly in my context, it doesn't, people say, oh, we don't go to church. I don't care. You need my help, that's what I'm here for. You know, going to church is not a prerequisite to be able to have a church funeral. And don't let anybody ever tell you that.
Okay. If there's anybody listening who has just had a terminal illness and they're feeling really afraid, have you any advice for them?
Talk. Get support. Don't be afraid to reach out. If you are of a Christian tradition and you want to reach out to me, you can do so through Mairead's contact details, and it will be entirely confidential. But if that is not your tradition, find someone you can talk to, because it's very important. The old saying, a problem shared is a problem halved, and it is. And I'm not trying to belittle the devastation the news of a terminal diagnosis is, but nothing's going to happen today, hopefully. So there's still time to sort things out.
Okay. And finally, anyone who is listening who is really struggling with their grief, have you any advice for them?
Many citizen advice offices have details for grief counsellors. You don't, not all grief counsellors you have to pay. Again, if you have a humanist celebrant who you know, who you like, you could talk to them. You could talk to your priest. You could talk to a friend. But it's important not to bottle it up, because the more you bottle it up and the more you don't deal with it, the worse it will seem and the worse it will get. It won't go away. It really won't. I've worked with people who suffer post-traumatic stress, people in emergency service and people in military organisations, and until they actually started dealing with the situation, it didn't heal. We're not very good, for all the talking that we do as Irish people, we're not very good about talking about our problems. We'll talk about everything else, we won't talk about our problems. I don't want to be troubling you, I don't want to be bothering you. Trouble us, bother us. Don't be afraid, because if you get yourself right, you could help someone in the future. And that's all I'd say to people. If you get help, be a help to someone in the future. Take a little and give a little back.
That's good, because I think if you hold things in, it's going to come out in other ways.
Absolutely.
So it has to come out of you.
Yeah, it will come out physically.
And finally, at the start of the podcast, I did say that I was aiming for this podcast to be informative, to inform, to uplift and inspire. It was definitely informative. Did we inspire? Did we uplift? Actually, if we leave with this final question I have, which might be uplifting, can you tell me what death has taught you about life and living? Or has your experience and your knowledge and what you know about witnessing death at such a close quarters has taught you about how to live?
Let life be an adventure. Don't arrive wherever we go saying, oh, I should have taken more time off. Oh, I should have taken a day off. I should have gone mad and gone and walked on the beach with my significant other or my kids or my friends. I should have tried that adventure. As long as it's not illegal and it's not going to do you any harm, get out and live life and wring every ounce out of life. Don't die with regrets.
That's great. Mark, on that note, thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's only taken you 6 months to pin me down.